Greetings, cozy knights. Lower your swords and rest by the fire. Tonight, we journey through the hidden secrets and obscure details of Elden Ring's lands between. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're listening from tonight. The Grace of Gold, a visual detail most players never notice. When you step into the lands between for the first time, the game presents you with a world filled with enemies and NPCs, each with their own role in the grand narrative. But there's something subtle happening right before your eyes that you've probably never consciously noticed. Many human enemies and non-tarnished NPCs in Elden Ring have golden coloring in their eyes. This isn't just a visual flourish or an artistic choice made without purpose. The Grace of Gold, the blessing bestowed by the Greater Will and Queen Marika, manifests physically in the eyes of those who possess it. Data miners who examined the game's code discovered this detail goes even deeper than what's visible during normal gameplay. By examining character models and eye textures, they found that gold in a character's eyes represents the extent of their connection to the Golden Order and the Erdtree's influence. Sometimes the golden coloring is subtle enough that you'd never notice without close inspection. Other times, the golden hue is hidden beneath masks, helmets, or other face coverings that enemies wear. This environmental storytelling technique shows rather than tells players about the fundamental difference between the Tarnished and everyone else in the lands between. The Tarnished, including your player character, lack this golden grace. Your eyes remain normal, reflecting your status as an outsider, someone who was stripped of the blessing long ago when Godfrey and his warriors were banished from the lands between. This small visual detail reinforces the game's central narrative without ever explicitly stating it through dialogue or item descriptions. You are different. You do not belong. And everyone who looks into your eyes can see this fundamental truth. Weather mechanics that actually matter. Rain in Elden Ring isn't just atmospheric window dressing designed to make the world feel more alive and dynamic. The weather actively affects your combat performance in ways that many players never realize throughout their entire playthrough. When it's raining in the lands between, fire-based spells and weapon skills deal slightly reduced damage. The moisture in the air dampens flames, making your fiery incantations and flame-infused weapons less effective against your foes. Conversely, lightning-based attacks see a damage increase during rainy weather. The water conducts electricity more effectively, allowing your lightning spears and electrically charged weapon arts to strike with enhanced fury. This creates an interesting dynamic where weather patterns can shift the tactical landscape of combat, rewarding players who pay attention to environmental conditions and adapt their strategies accordingly. There's another weather phenomenon that occurs under specific circumstances. Golden leaves from the Erdtree occasionally fall like rain across portions of the lands between, drifting down from the massive tree that dominates the skyline. While this might seem like a purely atmospheric detail, these golden leaves actually provide a gameplay benefit. When the leaves are falling, players receive a 5% increase to rune acquisition from defeated enemies. This weather effect is tied to the online group password system, triggering when someone in your connected group defeats a major boss. The visual spectacle of golden light filtering through falling leaves serves as both a beautiful environmental detail and a subtle multiplayer connection. reminding you that other players across the world are making progress in their own journeys through the lands between. The game also features localized weather effects that change based on your geographical location. Caelid's perpetual rot-tinged atmosphere isn't merely aesthetic. The environmental conditions there can slowly build up scarlet rot status on your character if you linger too long in certain areas without adequate protection. The mountaintops of the giants maintain their harsh, frigid conditions that can hypothetically affect your character, though the game doesn't implement a freezing mechanic in the way some players expected. Enemy AI behavior states. Every enemy in Elden Ring operates under different behavioral states that govern how they act. Understanding this system explains many of the seemingly inconsistent behaviors you encounter when approaching enemies. Enemies have a passive state that controls how they patrol their designated areas, their idle animations, and their general awareness of their surroundings. When combat begins, enemies transition to an aggressive state. This combat behavior dramatically changes how enemies perceive and respond to threats. This explains why some enemies appear to have limited peripheral vision while patrolling, but then suddenly become more aware once combat begins. The transition between these states isn't always seamless or logical from a realistic standpoint, but it serves important gameplay purposes. This behavioral system explains why you can sometimes sneak up on enemies with relative ease during their patrol patterns. But once they enter combat, they seem to develop greater awareness of your position. The aggressive state often grants enemies enhanced tracking abilities even when you break line of sight, preventing players from exploiting stealth mechanics too easily during active combat situations. The system also governs enemy cooperation and support behaviors. When one enemy enters combat, it can trigger nearby allies to become aggressive as well, creating coordinated attacks that feel organic but follow programmed patterns. Understanding this underlying system helps players develop better strategies for approaching enemy groups, knowing when breaking line of sight might cause enemies to return to their passive states. The hidden face of Godwyn. In the depths beneath Stormvale Castle, accessible through a secret underground passage near the Liftside Chamber grave site, players who venture downward discover one of the game's most unsettling environmental details. A massive, grotesque face emerges from what appears to be roots or organic matter, featuring tentacle-like protrusions and an expression frozen in something between agony and decay. According to NPC dialogue from Rogier, this hideous visage is connected to Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod to die during the Night of Black Knives. But this face beneath Stormvale isn't isolated. Evidence suggests Godwyn's corrupted form is spreading throughout the lands between like a plague. His death was only spiritual. His soul perished while his body lived on in a state of undeath, and this half-death created something new and terrible. The corruption emanating from his burial site beneath the Erdtree's roots manifests in multiple locations across the world. You can find smaller versions of this same disturbing face appearing in other areas, each one suggesting the spread of Godwyn's deathblight. Most disturbingly, the corruption has begun affecting the local wildlife. In areas where water flows above or near Godwyn's spreading influence, crabs and other aquatic creatures have started developing tumorous growths that resemble aspects of his corrupted face. The crabs found in the moat beneath Lendel directly above where Godwyn's body rests in the deep-root depths, show particularly grotesque mutations. Their shells sprout these death-touched growths, showing how Godwyn's half-death is literally poisoning the natural world. This environmental storytelling reveals a tragedy unfolding in slow motion. The first demigod to die didn't simply pass into oblivion. Instead, his cursed state of being creates a spreading corruption that threatens to eventually consume the entire world. The face beneath Stormveil is merely the first sign of a plague that has no cure and no end, growing stronger with each passing moment. The truth about nomadic merchants. The nomadic merchants scattered throughout the lands between are more than simple travelling salesmen with useful wares. They're survivors of an atrocity, the last remnants of a people who suffered unimaginable persecution. All nomadic merchants use frenzied flame incantations when attacked, employing madness-inducing spells that seem incongruous with their humble merchant personas. This combat behavior hints at their connection to one of the game's darkest secrets. Deep beneath Leyndell, in the subterranean shunning grounds, players who explore thoroughly will discover the path of the frenzied flame. This area requires navigating through the sewers and eventually finding a hidden passage behind Mog, the Omen's arena. In a chamber along this path lies a mass grave containing dozens, perhaps hundreds, of merchant corpses. The bodies wear the same clothing as the living merchants you've encountered throughout your journey, telling a horrific story without words. The Great Caravan, the collective community of travelling merchants, was persecuted and eventually massacred, their bodies dumped into these underground chambers and sealed away from the world above. The survivors you meet wandering the lands between are the few who escaped this genocide, forever separated from their people and forced to travel alone. Their mastery of frenzied flame incantations suggests a connection to this tragedy. The suffering and desperation of the merchants appears to have drawn the attention of the Three Fingers, granting them the power of chaos and madness. Evidence from cut dialogue and removed quest lines suggests the merchant Kale, one of the first NPCs you meet in Limgrave, originally had a more extensive story that would have revealed these truths directly. In unused content, Kale discovers what happened to his people and confronts the reality that the frenzied flame has touched the survivors. This questline was removed before the game's release, leaving only environmental clues and combat behaviors to tell the merchant's tragic tale. Killing any nomadic merchant causes all merchants in the game to become permanently hostile towards you, reflecting their remaining bonds of community. They also drop ball bearings that can be given to the Twin Maiden husks at Round Table Hold, allowing you to access their shops even after death. This gameplay mechanic acknowledges the terrible choice some players make to consolidate merchant access, even as it reinforces the tragedy of exterminating the last survivors of a genocided people. The transformation enemies explained scattered throughout the lands between. Players occasionally encounter enemies that seem perfectly normal until they get too close. A simple commoner suddenly transforms into a massive rune bear. A sleeping soldier morphs into a terrifying abductor virgin. These transformation enemies appear random and arbitrary at first, seemingly placed solely to terrify unsuspecting players exploring the world. But there's lore justification for these shape-shifting foes. The secret, according to many players' interpretation of the lore, lies in larval tears. rare items that allow players to respect their character attributes by offering them to Renala. These crystalline tears are intimately connected to the silver tears and mimic tears found in Nokron and other eternal cities. The item descriptions reveal that larval tears are connected to transformation and rebirth, themes central to Renala sorceries and the Eternal City's ancient experiments. Every enemy that transforms into something else drops a larval tear when killed. This connection has led many players to theorize that these transformed enemies are actually mimic tears that found their way to the surface, world and established themselves among regular enemies and NPCs. The mimic tears possess incredible shape-shifting abilities, able to perfectly replicate other creatures and even absorb their combat capabilities. Based on this evidence, it seems the transforming enemies represent mimic tears that have taken on the forms of weak or non-threatening creatures as camouflage. The capital outskirts feature one particularly notable transformation enemy. A commoner who appears to be a regular NPC transforms into Margit the Fell Omen when you approach. Unlike other transformation enemies, this Margit doesn't drop a larval tear. The implications of this are open to interpretation. Some players theorize this isn't a mimic tear pretending to be Margit, but could actually be Margit himself, using transformation magic or shape-shifting abilities to hide among commoners. Given that Margit can appear in multiple locations as Morgoth's projection, this interpretation suggests he continues watching the approaches to Leyndell even after you've defeated him at Stormvale Castle. Radan's gravity magic and Leonard General Radan, the legendary warrior who held the very stars in place through the force of his will, presents players with one of the game's most memorable boss encounters. The massive demigod charges across a battlefield while countless warriors challenge him to honorable combat in his festival of war. But veterans of the fight notice something immediately peculiar about Radan's appearance. This enormous towering general rides a horse that appears comically small, a regular-sized mount that should be crushed beneath his weight. The reason Radan learned gravity magic is suggested by details throughout the game. Item descriptions note his mastery of gravity sorceries, and players immediately notice Leonard, his beloved horse, appears comically small beneath the massive demigod's weight. The most touching interpretation, supported by environmental storytelling and item lore, is that Radan learned these reality-bending sorceries at least in part so he could continue riding Leonard. As the demigod's body expanded through whatever combination of rune fragments, divine power, and time caused his transformation, Leonard remained a normal horse. Based on what we observe in the game, it appears Radan dedicated himself to mastering gravity magic so he could nullify his own weight. The image of this mighty warrior, powerful enough to fight millennia to a standstill and hold the stars themselves in place. Doing this at least partially so he wouldn't have to abandon his horse, adds a touching layer of characterization to an otherwise tragic figure. Radan's love for Leonard humanizes a demigod who has been reduced to a maddened festival fighting shell of his former glory. Item descriptions related to Radan's equipment and his gravity-based spells hint at this relationship. The fact that Leonard survives the entire battle and continues carrying Radan despite the general's scarlet rot-induced madness speaks to the strength of their bond. Even in his deteriorated mental state, Radan never harms Leonard, And Leonard never abandons Radon, remaining loyal to the bitter end. After defeating Radon and allowing the stars to resume their motion, you've essentially broken a magical effect that Radon maintained continuously for years, perhaps decades. The stars fall across the night sky, and Rani's questline can progress, but you've also ended Radon's suffering. In his final moments, the general likely experienced brief clarity, knowing that his long vigil was finally over and that Leonard would no longer need to carry his burden. The painted worlds and artist ghosts. Throughout the lands between, observant players discover paintings created by wandering artists. These aren't mere decorative items or lore flavor text. Each painting depicts a specific location somewhere in the game world, and finding that exact spot triggers a ghostly encounter with the spirit of the artist who created the work. These spirits reward players with items, but the paintings also serve a deeper narrative purpose. The painted locations often highlight areas of particular beauty or significance that players might otherwise rush past without noticing. An artist stood in each spot, capturing the scene on canvas, meaning these places held special meaning or importance. The paintings draw your attention to the world's environmental storytelling, encouraging you to slow down and appreciate the craftsmanship that went into creating the lands between. 7 paintings exist in the base game, each leading to a different artist spirit. The locations range from obvious landmarks to obscure corners of the world that require careful exploration to locate. The challenge lies not in the difficulty of reaching these places, but in the observation and exploration required to match a 2-dimensional painting to a 3-dimensional landscape. The artist spirits don't speak when you find them. They simply manifest, acknowledge your presence with a gesture, and then disperse, leaving behind their reward. This silent exchange creates a melancholic atmosphere, as if these artists waited for someone, anyone, to appreciate their final work before finally moving on to whatever awaits beyond death. One painting leads to a location in the mountaintops of the Giants, requiring players to venture into the late game areas before completing this particular treasure hunt. Another points toward a spot in Liurnia that's technically visible from multiple locations, but requires specific positioning to match the painting's perspective. The painting system rewards patient, observant players who engage with the world beyond simply fighting through it. The stone stakes and spirits summoning small stone stakes protrude from the ground in specific areas throughout the lands between. Most players recognize them as markers, indicating where you can summon spirit ashes to assist in combat, but few understand the lore implications behind these totems. The stakes represent a connection between the living world and the realm of the dead, serving as anchors that allow spirits to temporarily manifest. The stones aren't randomly placed for gameplay balance. Each location where they appear has some connection to death, spirits, or the boundaries between worlds. Boss arenas naturally feature these stakes, as these are places where countless warriors have fallen in battle, strengthening the connection to death. But the stakes also appear in locations with more subtle death-related significance. Underground areas frequently feature spirit summoning stakes because the subterranean realms are closer to the roots of the Erd Tree, where the dead return to be absorbed back into the great tree's system of rebirth. The deep-root depths, Siofra River, and other underground locations maintain particularly strong connections to death and the afterlife, explaining the abundance of summoning opportunities in these zones. Certain overworld locations feature stakes because of historical events. Battlefields, where great conflicts occurred, places where important figures died, and areas where the natural boundary between life and death has worn thin, all allow spirit summoning. The environmental design communicates this death touch status through visual cues. Skeletal remains, graves, mausoleums, death-right birds, and other signs that death has a strong presence in the area. The blue gate symbol that appears on your screen when you can summon spirits is the game's user interface representation of this lore concept. You're not just calling spirits because the game arbitrarily allows it in certain areas. You're accessing locations where the barrier between the living world and the realm of spirits is thin enough to permit their temporary manifestation. Renala's rebirth chamber and the students. Queen Renala sits in the center of her grand library, cradling a great rune and mumbling to her amber egg, while her corrupted students crawl around her, singing a haunting lullaby. The boss fight against Renala represents one of the game's most visually distinctive encounters, and the second phase reveals the protective illusion that Rani created to shield her mother from complete madness. But the true horror of this scene lies in the details of what happened to Renala's academy. The students surrounding Renala aren't simply loyal scholars who stayed with their queen after her fall from power. Many of them have been transformed, corrupted by Renala's attempts to achieve perfect rebirth through her sorceries. The crawling, malformed students singing the lullaby show the price of Renala's obsession. Her research into rebirth and transformation didn't just affect test subjects in distant laboratories. It consumed her own students, the very people who trusted her and sought to learn from her wisdom. Renala's ex-husband Radagon abandoned her to marry Marika, taking the great rune she had treasured. This betrayal shattered Renala's mind, causing her to retreat into her library and focus obsessively on the amber egg he left behind. Her students, loyal to the end, stayed with her as her mental state deteriorated. Some willingly subjected themselves to her rebirth experiments, hoping to help their queen achieve her goals, or perhaps trying to find a way to restore her to sanity. The Sweetings, as the crawling students are called, maintain their loyalty even in their transformed state. They attack any intruders who threaten Renala, singing their lullaby to soothe her distress and using what remains of their magical abilities to defend their queen. The tragedy lies in their devotion. These students sacrifice their own humanity for a queen who can barely recognize them anymore, trapped in their malformed bodies while their minds remain somewhat intact, aware of what they've become. Renala's rebirth services that she offers players after her defeat represent her sorceries functioning as intended. She can reshape bodies, reallocate fundamental attributes, and transform appearances without the grotesque side effects that afflicted her students. But she provides this service mechanically, without real engagement or emotion, still cradling her amber egg and lost in memories of Radagon. Her students gave everything for her, and she barely remembers they exist. The true nature of Marika and Radagon. Hidden in the royal capital of Lendel, there exists a statue that reveals one of Elden Ring's most significant lore revelations. Using the law of regression incantation on a specific statue near the Queen's bedchamber, causes golden text to appear, revealing that Radagon and Marika are one and the same. This single entity exists as both male and female aspects, two halves of a divine being that somehow separated themselves into distinct individuals capable of acting independently. The implications of this revelation ripple through the entire narrative. Radagon married Renala and fathered 3 children, Radan, Rykard, and Rani. Later, Radagon left Renala to return to Leyndell, where he married Marika, except Marika was Radagon all along. This bizarre situation resulted in Radagon and Marika having children with themselves, producing the twin demigods Malenia and Miquella. Both twins were born with terrible curses, which many players interpret as the consequence of this forbidden self-union. The nature of Marika and Radagon's duality remains somewhat mysterious. Are they truly 2 separate consciousnesses sharing one body? Can they manifest separately, or does one aspect sleep while the other acts? The game provides no definitive answers, but certain details suggest a complicated relationship between the 2 halves. Radagon appears to be the more loyal servant of the greater will, dedicating himself to maintaining the Golden Order and repairing the Elden Ring. Marika, conversely, seems to have grown disillusioned with the greater will, eventually shattering the Elden Ring in an act of rebellion. This conflict between the 2 aspects of the same being creates a literally divided entity at war with itself, unable to commit fully to either maintaining or destroying the system it embodies. The final boss battle reflects this conflict. You fight Radagon first, who desperately tries to repair the Elden Ring even as you battle him. After defeating Radagon's form, the Elden Beast, the Greater Will's physical avatar, emerges from his body. The Elden Beast's sword appears as 2 blades woven together, which players have interpreted as symbolizing the duality of Radagon and Marika, unified within a single weapon. Every aspect of the final encounter reflects themes of duality, unity, and the fundamental paradox of a god divided against itself. The alchemical concept of the Ribis provides additional context for understanding Marika and Radagon. The Ribis represents a being that transcends masculine and feminine, combining both into a perfect whole that exists beyond normal human limitations. Marika and Radagon's separation for most of the lands between's history suggests an internal conflict, 2 halves of a transcendent being unable to reconcile their differences, physically splitting to illustrate their spiritual divide. The spread of scarlet rot and Malenia's bloom Caelid wasn't always the hellish, rot-blighted wasteland players traverse in search of runes and Radan. The region was once a thriving land under the rule of Radan, who maintained order and prosperity in his territory. Everything changed during Malenia's invasion and her climactic battle with the Star Scourge. Unable to overcome Radan through martial skill alone, Malenia triggered her Scarlet Aeonia, the bloom of rot that marked her as an Emprien chosen by the outer god of rot. The explosion of scarlet rot devastated Caelid, transforming vibrant landscapes into a rotting nightmare. The red sky, the black earth, and the mutated creatures all result from Malenia's bloom. She released an apocalyptic plague upon the land, sacrificing the entire region and its inhabitants to achieve a stalemate against Radan. The battle ended with neither victor, Malenia collapsing and being carried home by her knight, while Radan was left to slowly succumb to the rot, consuming his mind and body. Clean Rot Knights, Malenia's elite guard, carried their commander away from the battlefield and back to the Halleck tree. At least one knight specifically is noted in item descriptions as having personally shouldered the burden of carrying millennia across vast distances, while fighting off enemies and enduring the rot's effects. This act of loyalty cost the knight dearly, as prolonged exposure to millennia's rot corruption transformed the clean rot knights into something between living and dead. Radan's Festival of Combat serves a dual purpose. On the surface, it appears to be a celebration of warriors' culture, giving the mighty general the honorable death in battle that he deserves. But beneath this noble veneer lies a darker truth. Radan must die because the rot is driving him insane, making him increasingly dangerous to everyone around him. His remaining soldiers cannot bring themselves to kill their beloved general, so they call upon outside warriors to do what they cannot. The Scarlet Rot doesn't simply kill or mutate its victims. It fundamentally transforms the nature of the infected area, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of decay and rebirth in the image of the outer god of rot. Caelid will never recover. The rot has established itself too deeply, corrupting the very essence of the land. Future generations will know this area only as a blighted dead land, and the lake of rot beneath the lands between continues to leak its poison upward through cracks in the earth. Millennia herself exists in a liminal state, neither fully alive nor completely consumed by rot. Her body bears the scars of her affliction, with her right side showing advanced decomposition and corruption. Yet she maintains herself through sheer willpower, rejecting the rot's influence while simultaneously drawing upon its power in combat. Her second bloom during the player's boss fight demonstrates that she could trigger another apocalyptic release of rot at any time. But doing so would mean surrendering herself completely to the outer god she resists. The tragedy of Millennia and Caelid highlights the horrific consequences of divine power wielded by mortal beings. Millennia's pride, her determination to best Radan and prove herself as Miquella's blade, led her to sacrifice an entire region and doom Radan to a fate worse than death. The rot that afflicts her represents both her greatest weakness and her ultimate weapon, a curse that threatens to consume everything she touches. The architecture of Farum Azula crumbling. Farum Azula floats suspended in a storm, existing outside normal time and space. This ancient seat of dragon worship houses some of the game's most challenging enemies and reveals crucial information about the history preceding the age of the Erd Tree. The architecture tells a story of a civilization that reached incredible heights before falling into ruin, literally broken apart and scattered across an impossible location beyond the world's normal boundaries. The ruins show evidence of a society built around dragon worship and communion. Stone statues of dragons adorn massive structures, and the beastmen who still inhabit the ruins served as the dragon's attendants and warriors. The scale of the construction suggests a civilization with access to significant resources and advanced understanding of both physical and magical engineering. They built monuments to last millennia, and even in their ruined state, these structures convey a sense of lost grandeur. What caused Farum Azula's destruction and its displacement from normal reality remains somewhat mysterious. The item description for ruin fragments, small stones found throughout the lands between, reveals that these pieces fell from a temple in the sky. Players who collect these fragments from the earlier stages of the game are handling physical evidence of Farum Azula's fall, foreshadowing the location's existence long before they actually visit the crumbling ruins. The time distortion surrounding Farum Azula allows players to encounter Dragon Lord Placidusax, the first Elden Lord who ruled before the Age of the Erdtree. Accessing this boss requires lying down at a specific location, triggering a temporal displacement that sends you back to when Placidusax still inhabited the ruins. The boss arena features a completed version of structures that are crumbled and destroyed in the normal timeline, showing Farum Azula in its prime before whatever cataclysm tore it apart. The Beast Clergyman's presence in Farum Azula connects the location to the present-day religious conflicts. Gurranq, who players can encounter much earlier in the Bestial Sanctum, is revealed to be Maliketh, Marika's shadow, and the wielder of destined death. His presence in both locations and his role in safeguarding the Rune of Death tie Farum Azula's ancient history to the contemporary struggle over the Elden Ring's power. Exploring Farum Azula provides context for understanding the dragon's former dominance over the lands between. Before the Erdtree's ascension and the establishment of Marika's Golden Order, dragons ruled through a different system entirely. The remains of this dragon-worshipping civilization persist in various forms throughout the game world, from the dragon cult in Caelid to the dragon communion churches scattered across the landscape. Gideon Ofnir's true agenda. Gideon Ofnir, the all-knowing, presents himself as a mentor and information broker at the Round Table Hold. He requests that players gather information about the demigods, claiming to compile knowledge that will help the Tarnished in their quest to become Elden Lord. But paying close attention to Gideon's actions and his final confrontation reveals a very different agenda beneath his scholarly facade. Gideon sends players to gather medallion halves needed to access secret areas. He tasks you with investigating the demigods and reporting your findings back to him. Gideon positions himself as a helpful ally, but each piece of information you provide only serves his own purposes. He's gathering intelligence not to help you succeed, but to better understand how to prevent anyone from becoming Elden Lord. The truth emerges when you finally reach the Erdtree and confront Gideon before the final bosses. He tries to kill you, explaining that Queen Marika desires an eternal struggle, with Tarnished forever fighting and dying without anyone achieving victory. Gideon has embraced this nihilistic vision, believing that perpetual conflict without resolution represents Marika's true will. He opposes anyone actually succeeding in becoming Elden Lord because he thinks the struggle itself is the point. Gideon's adopted daughter Nefeli represents another piece of his complex character. He took her in specifically because of her connection to Huaralu, Godfrey's true identity. Gideon recognized Nefeli's importance within the Golden Lineage and positioned himself to exploit that knowledge. When Nefeli expresses doubt about Gideon's methods and morality, he disowns her without hesitation, revealing that his paternal relationship was always transactional rather than genuinely loving. The All-Knowing's intelligence network extends throughout the Round Table Hold. He knows about the secret room beneath the hold where the two fingers commune with the greater will. He's aware of various NPCs' quest lines and will comment on their progress, sometimes with information he shouldn't logically possess. Gideon's knowledge gathering extends beyond passive observation into active manipulation, and he uses the information players provide to interfere with events across the lands between. Despite his significant power and knowledge, Gideon ultimately serves as a cautionary tale about the futility of trying to understand everything. The all-knowing discovers so much that he becomes paralyzed by knowledge, unable to commit to any course of action except preventing change. His resistance to the player succeeding stems from his deep understanding of Marika's suffering and madness, which has convinced him that the current broken state of the world is somehow preferable to any alternative. The underground cities and the Night of Black Knives beneath the surface of the lands between lie the eternal cities of Nokron and Nokstella, ancient civilizations that predate the Erdtree's dominance. These underground realms maintain their own history and culture, having fallen from the surface world after committing some unspecified transgression against the greater will. The punishment was catastrophic, burying entire cities beneath the earth and condemning their inhabitants to eternal darkness. The Night of Black Knives, the conspiracy that led to Godwyn's assassination and triggered the Shattering, has direct connections to these underground civilizations. The Black Knife assassins who carried out the deed used weapons imbued with the Rune of Death, and the knife print item suggests they underwent strange rituals related to their mission. Several pieces of evidence point toward Rani the Witch as the architect of this plot, but the underground cities provided essential support. The Black Knives themselves were Numen women, the same race as Queen Marika. Some item descriptions note that the assassins were rumored to be close to Marika, raising uncomfortable questions about the Queen's potential involvement in or knowledge of the plot to kill her own son. The conspiracy runs deep enough that multiple factions with seemingly contradictory goals all had some investment in Godwyn's death. Rani's goal was to shed her Empyrean flesh and achieve a different form of existence, free from the greater will's influence. Killing Godwyn was part of a larger ritual where Rani killed her own body while Godwyn's soul perished, creating 2 half-deaths instead of 2 complete deaths. This violation of the natural order had consequences that Rani might not have fully anticipated, setting Godwyn's corpse on its path to becoming the source of those who live in death. The Eternal City's role in this conspiracy stems from their own grievances against the greater will and the current order. Having been punished and buried ages ago, they would naturally support any attempt to disrupt or overthrow the system that condemned them. The Silver Tear technology and the Mimic Tear abilities originated in these underground civilizations, demonstrating their advanced understanding of life, death, and transformation. Exploring Nokron and Nokstella reveals evidence of the civilization's former glory. Despite their subterranean exile, these cities maintain sophisticated societies with their own art, architecture, and culture. The puppet soldiers that guard certain areas were created using Eternal City technology, showing their mastery over animation and artificial life. The Fingerslayer blade, a weapon capable of harming the Greater Will's representatives, was forged in Nokron, highlighting the underground city's commitment to resisting the order that destroyed them. The Halig Tree and Miquella's grand plan, deep within the most secret reaches of the lands between, stands the Halig Tree. Miquella, the Unalloyed's attempt to create an alternative to the Erdtree and establish a new order free from Outer God's influence. Reaching this location requires assembling a secret medallion. Using it at a hidden location, and then navigating one of the game's most challenging areas. The Haligtree represents Miquella's ambitions made manifest, but also reveals the ultimate failure of those ambitions. Miquella was born cursed with eternal youth, forever trapped in a child's body, despite possessing a brilliant mind and powerful abilities. His twin sister Malenia suffered from the scarlet rot, a curse that would eventually consume her if left unchecked. Miquella dedicated himself to finding cures for both afflictions, developing unalloyed gold that could resist outer god's influence, and growing the Haligtree as a home for those cast out or afflicted by the current order. The Haligtree attracted those who had no place in Marika's order. Albinorix, an artificial race subject to persecution and suffering from degenerative conditions, found sanctuary there. The Clean Rot Knights, loyal to Malenia, established themselves as protectors of the tree. Various outcasts and refugees gathered in this haven, believing in Miquella's vision of an inclusive order that wouldn't discriminate based on birth or affliction. Miquella's plan involved watering the Haligtree with his own blood to accelerate its growth. He embedded himself within the tree, using his own life force to nourish it. But before the Haligtree could reach maturity, Marg the Lord of Blood, another Empyrean seeking to establish his own dynasty, invaded and kidnapped Miquella from his cocoon. This interruption left the Haligtree in the state of arrested development, slowly dying without Miquella's presence to sustain it. The environmental design of the Haligtree shows a location caught between hope and despair. Areas near the tree's base remain relatively intact, showing the architectural achievements of those who built this sanctuary. As players ascend higher into the tree's branches, the rot becomes more prevalent, corruption spreading through the golden wood. By the time you reach Malenia's arena at the tree's crown, the decay is undeniable, with rot blooms covering surfaces and the air thick with spores. Malenia remains as the Haligtree's final guardian, waiting for her brother's return. Her dedication to Miquella drives every action she takes, and she continues defending his domain even though Miquella isn't present to protect. Her boss fight represents the pinnacle of the game's difficulty, with her waterfowl dance and scarlet rot abilities creating one of the most challenging encounters From Software has ever designed. Defeating Malenia means crushing the last hope of the Haligtree's defenders and ensuring that Miquella's dream dies along with its guardian. The Omen and the Sewers. Beneath the pristine streets of Lendel, the royal capital, lies a network of sewers housing the city's darkest secrets. The subterranean shunning grounds serve as a dumping ground for anything the surface world wishes to forget, including the Omen, children born with horns and beastly features, who are considered cursed by the Golden Order's doctrines. The treatment of the Omen reveals the cruelty underlying Marika's supposedly enlightened regime. Omen children born to nobility have their horns excised in incredibly painful procedures. Omen killer Rollo performed these operations, wielding his cleaver to cut away the horns that mark children as cursed. The process doesn't kill the Omen outright, but it leaves them scarred physically and psychologically. Morgoth and Morg, sons of Queen Marika herself, were both born as Omen, and thus imprisoned beneath the capital, hidden away so their existence wouldn't embarrass the royal family. The Spirit Ash description for the Omen killer reveals that Rollo had to drown his empathy in intoxicants to perform his duties. He understood on some level that mutilating children because of their appearance was wrong, but the Golden Order's edicts demanded it, and he lacked the moral courage to refuse. His devotion to his task, despite his internal conflict, shows how systems of oppression corrupt even those who implement them. Common-born Omen face even worse fates. Without noble blood to protect them, these unfortunate children are simply thrown into the sewers to die or somehow survive in the darkness. Those who do survive form the shambling, aggressive Omen enemies that inhabit the underground areas. Their hostility stems from lifetimes of persecution and abuse, reduced to monsters by a society that never gave them a chance at normal lives. Morgott's story stands as one of the most tragic in Elden Ring. Despite being imprisoned beneath the capital, despite being rejected by his mother and his entire civilization because of circumstances beyond his control, Morgott remains fanatically loyal to the Golden Order. He serves as the de facto ruler of Leyndell, fighting to prevent Tarnished from reaching the Erd Tree and maintaining the system that wronged him. His loyalty is heartbreaking in its devotion to an order that never showed him kindness. Mog took a different path, embracing his status as an Omen and seeking power outside the Golden Order. He found an outer god called the Formless Mother and established his own dynasty based around blood rituals. While Morgott continued serving the system that oppressed him, Morg rejected it entirely and built something new, though his methods are equally disturbing and his treatment of Miquella arguably worse than what the Golden Order did to him. The sewers represent more than just a level design challenge. They're a physical manifestation of what civilizations become when they hide their inconvenient truths underground rather than addressing them. The filth, the rot, the monsters, and the madness festering beneath Leyndell's golden streets show what accumulates when a society refuses to acknowledge its victims and its sins. The Glintstone Academy in Sorcery Politics, Raya Lucaria. Academy stands as the premier institution for sorcerer study in the lands between. Its distinctive water-wheel architecture visible from great distances across Luonia. But beneath its grand spires and scholarly atmosphere lies a cutthroat political environment where competing theories of sorcery spark violent conflicts between factions. The Academy's history reveals how the pursuit of knowledge can become corrupted by ambition and ideology. The walls of the debate parlor within the Academy feature portraits depicting various glintstone scholars, each wearing one of the distinctive stone crowns that players can find and equip. These stone masks represent different schools of magical thought within the Academy, and the scholars depicted achieved enough renown to have their likenesses permanently displayed. The Twin Sage crown appears on what looks like a two-headed figure, but it actually represents two separate scholars so close they were memorialized together. What happened to these legendary scholars remains somewhat mysterious, but the various glintstone amalgamations found throughout the Academy provide disturbing hints. These horrible fusions of multiple sorcerers' heads combined into single, barely living masses suggest experiments in combining magical knowledge or power that went catastrophically wrong. The glintstone heads that players can equip might be all that remains of sorcerers who push their research too far. The Cuckoos, an order of magic knights serving the Academy, engage in military operations beyond simple defense. They led the invasion of the royal capital, bringing war directly to Leyndell's gates. This military aggression shows how the Academy's theoretical pursuits of knowledge translated into practical applications of force. The battle mages and knights bearing the cuckoo insignia represent the marriage of martial skill and sorcerous power. Renala's fall from power created a vacuum that different factions rushed to fill. Selen represents the primeval sorcerers who study the origins of glintstone magic and seek to restore older, more primal forms of sorcery. Her quest involves finding other primeval sorcerers and ultimately attempting to restore their original forms, though the results of her success are disturbing, transforming her into an immobile graven mass similar to the amalgamations found throughout the Academy. The rivalry between different magical philosophies extends beyond academic debate into practical application. Some sorcerers focus on stellar and lunar magic, drawing power from cosmic sources. Others prefer comet-based sorceries, channeling raw destructive force. The full moon sorceries associated with Renala contrast with the dark moon sorceries taught by Rani, representing two different approaches to lunar magic with political and philosophical implications. Access to the Academy requires a glintstone key, but a second key, hidden within the Academy proper, suggests secrets beyond the standard curriculum. This second key allows entry into restricted areas where dangerous experiments or forbidden knowledge remained locked away. Players who thoroughly explore these restricted sections find powerful sorceries and equipment that the Academy's administration deemed too dangerous for general access. The walking mausoleums and remembrance duplication. Scattered throughout the lands between, massive stone structures walk on elephantine legs, their bells tolling mournfully as they traverse the landscape. These walking mausoleums house the remains of demigods who died without grace, those who perished outside Marika's order and thus could not return to the Erd Tree. The mausoleum's eternal wandering represents both a monument and a prison, honoring the fallen while ensuring their souls remain separate from the Erd Tree's cycle. The mausoleum's construction combines stone architecture with organic elements, creating structures that blur the line between building and creature. Their legs, covered in white stone but moving with biological purpose, suggest these monuments were created through some fusion of engineering and magic that allowed them to sustain themselves indefinitely. The bells attached to each mausoleum ring constantly, a death knell that never ceases, announcing the presence of the ungraced dead to all who hear. Some mausoleums must be brought down by attacking the white skull-like growths covering their legs. These barnacle-like attachments aren't merely decorative. They represent some form of parasitic corruption or protective layer, and removing them causes the mausoleum to kneel, granting access to the entrance on top. Other mausoleums lack these growths, and instead require players to cleverly position themselves to jump aboard from elevated terrain. Inside each mausoleum rests a coffin or memorial to one of the demigods who died during the shattering. Players can interact with these memorials to duplicate remembrances, the special boss souls that can be exchanged for weapons and items. This duplication mechanic has lore implications beyond its gameplay function. The mausoleums preserve not just the bodies, but the very essence of these fallen demigods, maintaining copies of their power that can be extracted multiple times. The mausoleum's wandering paths seem random at first, but they often travel through areas significant to the demigods they honor. Some theories suggest the mausoleums are searching for something, perhaps attempting to find rest or seeking locations where their entombed demigods once lived. Their endless journeys mirror the Tarnished's own wandering, both parties moving through the lands between in search of something that might no longer exist. Not all demigods receive the honor of a walking mausoleum. The monuments specifically house those who died without grace, suggesting a distinction between demigods who remained within Marika's favor and those who fell outside it. The criteria for which demigods warranted these elaborate mobile tombs versus simpler burial or cremation reveals the complex hierarchies even among the divine offspring. The mausoleum's bells carry special significance in the Lands Between's culture. The haunting toll serves multiple purposes, announcing the presence of noble dead, warning away those who would disturb the monuments, and perhaps calling to other spirits or forces. The sound design makes these structures audible long before they become visible, their approach heralded by mournful ringing that echoes across hills and valleys. Patches and his eternal role patches appears in Elden Ring, continuing his tradition across multiple From Software games of being a conniving, treacherous merchant who nonetheless survives through guile and cowardice. His questline involves multiple encounters where he attempts to kill you, apologizes, and begs for mercy, then sets up shop acting as if nothing happened. But Patch's presence across multiple games and even different universes suggests something more significant than a simple, recurring joke character. His survival instincts and ability to find valuable items in dangerous locations make Patches uniquely adapted to the harsh worlds of From Software games. Where noble knights perish and mighty warriors fall, Patches endures through careful risk assessment and shameless betrayal. He represents an alternative approach to these brutal worlds, succeeding not through strength or courage, but through cunning and the willingness to abandon principles at the first sign of danger. In Elden Ring, Patches appears in Murkwater Cave, where he ambushes you as a boss fight. Upon reducing his health sufficiently, he surrenders and begs for mercy, offering to become a merchant if you spare him. This encounter establishes his character immediately, showing players that Patches values survival above honor or consistency. Spare him, and he'll show up in various locations throughout the game, always ready to sell items while also potentially setting you up for another betrayal. His questline involves interactions with Tanith at Volcano Manor, and eventually leads to him giving you the Dancer's Castanets, an item that becomes important for Tanith's story after you defeat Rykard. Patches demonstrates surprising emotional depth in these interactions, showing genuine concern for Tanith, despite his usual self-centered behavior. This glimpse of authentic care suggests there's more to Patches than pure cowardice and greed. Patches' shop inventory includes useful items, though often at inflated prices. He claims to acquire these goods through exploration and scavenging, finding treasures in places too dangerous for most merchants. His ability to locate rare items without apparently engaging in serious combat suggests either exceptional stealth skills or insider knowledge about where valuable things can be found. Either way, Patches demonstrates expertise in avoiding danger while still profiting from dangerous situations. The philosophical question of Patches' identity across games becomes relevant in Elden Ring. Is this the same Patches who appeared in Dark Souls and Bloodborne, somehow traveling between worlds? Or are these different individuals who share characteristics because they represent an archetype rather than a continuous character? The games never explain, leaving Patches as an intentionally ambiguous figure who transcends normal narrative continuity. Millennia's Scarlet Aeonia and the Rot God Millennia's boss fight features two phases, with the second phase beginning after she proclaims, "I am Millennia, Blade of Miquella, and I have never known defeat," immediately before blooming into her Scarlet Aeonia form. This transformation represents Millennia accepting more of the Rot God's power, sacrificing portions of her humanity to access greater strength. The bloom mechanic connects directly to the outer god of Rot's nature and goals. The outer god of Rot seeks to spread decay and transformation throughout the world, breaking down existing structures and creating new forms of life through decomposition and rebirth. Millennia serves as this god's chosen champion, despite her resistance to being fully consumed. Her curse of scarlet rot represents both a weapon she can wield and a parasite she must constantly fight against. The tension between these roles defines her character and explains her fierce devotion to Miquella. Each time Millennia blooms, she spreads the rot's influence further and becomes more integrated with the outer god's power. The first bloom occurred during her battle with Radan in Caelid, creating the wasteland that region became. The second bloom happens during the player's boss fight, showing that Millennia can still access this apocalyptic power despite the damage it does to her own body and mind. Item descriptions suggest a third bloom may represent her full transformation into the Rot God's avatar, though this state remains unseen in the game. Miquella's research into unalloyed gold aims specifically at helping Millennia resist the rot. The golden needle he created can suppress the influence of outer gods, providing temporary relief from Millennia's curse. But the treatment requires repeated applications, and Miquella's disappearance means Millennia no longer has access to new needles as the old ones lose effectiveness. Her condition slowly worsens without her brother's care, adding urgency to her desire to see him returned. The Clean Rot Knights who serve Millennia accepted exposure to the Scarlet Rot as a price of their loyalty. These warriors developed partial immunity to the rot through repeated exposure, though it transformed them into something between living and undead. They wear distinctive armor designed to slow rot spread through their bodies while allowing mobility for combat. Their dedication to Millennia extends beyond normal military loyalty into religious devotion, viewing her as a tragic figure worthy of their sacrifice. Millennia's prosthetic limbs replace body parts lost to the rot's ravages. Her sword arm and leg are clearly artificial, crafted from unalloyed gold to resist further corruption. These prosthetics give her superhuman speed and precision, turning physical loss into tactical advantage. The fact that she adapted to these limitations and became one of the most dangerous warriors in the lands between speaks to her indomitable will and combat genius. The rots spread through Caelid created new forms of life adapted to the toxic environment. The corrupted plants, mutated animals, and rot-infused enemies represent the outer god's vision of transformation through decay. Where other gods might seek to preserve or purify, the Rot God embraces destruction as a necessary stage in creating something new. Millennia's blooming accelerates this process, seeding areas with concentrated rot that will transform the landscape over time. The Flame of Frenzy and the Three Fingers Deep beneath Leyndell past the subterranean shunning grounds, and through a secret passage behind Mog the Omen's arena, lies one of the game's most consequential secret locations. The Cathedral of the Forsaken houses the Three Fingers, a cosmic entity that serves as the counterpart to the two fingers found throughout the lands between. Where the two fingers represent the greater will and advocate for the Golden Order, the three fingers embody chaos and the flame of frenzy. Accessing this area requires navigating treacherous platforming sections through the sewers, jumping across deadly drops, and maneuvering around grotesque enemies. The hidden passage behind Mog's altar remains invisible until struck, revealing a long descent into darkness. At the bottom, a door sealed with mysterious power blocks the path forward. The game provides no obvious hints for bypassing this door, forcing players to either experiment or consult outside resources. The solution requires removing all armor and approaching the door naked, symbolically stripping away the player's identity and protection to receive the frenzied flame's blessing. This unusual requirement connects to themes of vulnerability and surrender, suggesting that accepting frenzy means abandoning the defenses society provides. Upon opening the door and descending further, the three fingers await in a chamber lit only by chaos flames. The interaction with the three fingers is not presented as a choice through dialogue options. Simply reaching this chamber and approaching the entity causes it to embrace your character, burning the flame of frenzy into your body. Your eyes burn with yellow chaos flames, marking you as the Lord of Frenzied Flame. This branding changes the ending you will receive unless you take specific steps to reverse it. The Lord of Frenzied Flame ending represents the most nihilistic conclusion to Elden Ring's story. Rather than becoming Elden Lord and working within the existing system, you instead burn away the entire world, reducing everything to primordial chaos. Melina explicitly warns against this path and will abandon you if you choose it. Understanding that the frenzy ending means destruction without possibility of renewal. Reversing the frenzied flame's influence requires Miquella's Needle, an item obtained through Millicent's questline. The needle must be used in Dragon Lord Placidusax's arena, a location existing outside normal time. Only in this temporally displaced space can the needle suppress the frenzied flame's influence, allowing you to pursue other endings. The specific location requirement suggests that the frenzy exists across all time simultaneously, requiring you to step outside time's flow to escape its grasp. Hieta's questline leads to the same location, with the blind girl consuming shabriri grapes along the way. These grapes are actually human eyes, a disturbing detail that only becomes clear from item descriptions. Hieta's consumption of eyes connects to themes of sight and truth, with the blind woman seeing spiritual realities that normal vision obscures. Her journey ends at the door to the Three Fingers, where she recognizes the flame of frenzy as something that will burn away all distinction and suffering by destroying everything. The merchant's connection to the frenzied flame adds tragic context to this path. The mass grave in the shunning grounds shows where the merchant's ancestors were sealed away and eventually called out to the Three Fingers in their desperation. The frenzy answered their prayers by granting destructive power, but at the cost of spreading madness. The merchant's persecution led directly to the frenzied flame, gaining a foothold in the world. The Age of Stars and Ranni's plan Ranni the Witch's questline represents one of the most extensive and complex NPC storylines in Elden Ring, spanning dozens of hours and requiring players to navigate multiple dangerous locations. Her plan involves achieving godhood while simultaneously removing the god's influence from the world, creating a paradox that defines her philosophy. Ranni seeks to establish an age of stars where divine beings exist at a distance, unable to directly interfere with mortal lives. The questline begins when players find Ranni at her tower in northwest Liurnia. She recruits you to serve her by finding a way to assassinate the Two Fingers, representatives of the greater will. This task requires descending into Nokron to retrieve the Fingerslayer blade, a weapon forged specifically to harm entities like the Fingers. Nokron's location beneath the lands between means players must first defeat Radahn, whose death allows the stars to fall and creates the crater that opens the path underground. Ranni's true body is long dead, killed during the Night of Black Knives in the same ritual that claimed Godwyn's soul. She now exists as a spirit inhabiting a doll, crafted in the image of her mentor, the Snow Witch. This doll body grants her unique existence outside the normal rules governing life and death, but it also limits her ability to directly act in the world. Most of her plan requires agents working on her behalf, while she remains bound to her tower or doll form. The servants in Ranni's employ each have deep loyalty to her cause. Bled, her half-wolf companion, was created by the Two Fingers to serve as her shadow and protector. Iji, the giant blacksmith, provides equipment and counsel. Seluvis, the duplicitous sorcerer, claims to serve Ranni, but pursues his own agenda, involving transforming people into puppet slaves. These conflicting loyalties and hidden agendas create complications throughout the questline. Finding Ranni's true body hidden in Ainsel River reveals the scale of her plan. She preserved her original form in a secret location, keeping it safe while her spirit moved freely. The Dark Moon Greatsword, her signature weapon, awaits players who complete her questline, a gift symbolizing her recognition of your service. The sword channels cold sorceries and represents Ranni's philosophy, combining deadly beauty with the chill of dark space. Ranni's ending removes the Elden Ring's influence from the lands between entirely, taking it with her into the cold dark of space where it cannot affect mortal affairs. She becomes a god while simultaneously ensuring that godhood means distance and separation rather than control. Her Age of Stars promises freedom from divine tyranny, but also means losing the guidance and structure that the Golden Order provided. Mortals would have to navigate life without any divine oversight, for better or worse. The philosophical implications of Ranni's plan raise questions about agency and abandonment. Is removing all divine influence truly liberation, or does it leave mortals vulnerable without protection or purpose? Ranni believes that mortals deserve the dignity of self-determination, even if it means facing hardship without divine intervention. Her plan represents a fundamentally different approach to solving the Lands Between's problems compared to other endings. Godfrey, first Elden Lord Godfrey's boss fight, occurs near the end of the game, requiring players to defeat him before accessing the final confrontation with Radagon and the Elden Beast. But Godfrey's identity and history provide crucial context for understanding the Tarnished's role and Marika's long-term planning. The battle showcases one of From Software's most dramatic boss designs, with Godfrey transitioning from civilized king to savage warrior during the encounter. Before becoming Elden Lord, Godfrey was known as Huara Luz, a barbaric chieftain who led through raw strength and ferocity. His marriage to Queen Marika elevated him to the position of first Elden Lord, but Marika required him to temper his savage nature to be suitable for civilized rule. The solution came through Sarosh, the lion spirit who attached himself to Godfrey's back and served as a spiritual regulator, suppressing the warrior's most violent impulses. This arrangement allowed Godfrey to lead the Golden Order's forces while maintaining the discipline necessary for rulership. He fathered multiple children with Marika, including Godwyn, Mog, and Morgoth, establishing the golden lineage of demigods. Under his leadership, the Golden Order expanded through military conquest, with Godfrey's armies bringing vast territories under Marika's control. Eventually, Marika stripped Godfrey and his warriors of grace, banishing them from the lands between to wander in distant lands. This exile served multiple purposes. It removed a potential rival to Radagon, who Marika would recall to serve as her consort. It also sent Godfrey beyond the lands between's borders to wage eternal war, keeping him strong and battle-hardened for his eventual return. The Tarnished, including the player character, descend from Godfrey's warriors. The entire population of Tarnished represents an army that Marika created through her machinations, exiling them specifically so they would eventually return when needed. Godfrey's return coincides with the player's own journey, suggesting Marika's plan required both the legendary First Elden Lord and countless lesser warriors, all arriving simultaneously. During the boss fight's second phase, Godfrey kills Sarosh, tearing the lion spirit from his back and ending the restraint that civilized him. The arena fills with golden energy as Huara Lu emerges, no longer bound by courtly manners or restrained violence. This transformation showcases the warrior's true nature, the primal force that made him worthy of becoming Elden Lord in the first place. Godfrey's respect for worthy opponents manifests in his fighting style and demeanor. He treats the battle as a test of strength rather than personal animosity, even praising the player character upon defeat. This warrior's honor contrasts sharply with the political scheming and divine machinations that characterize much of the game's other conflicts. Godfrey represents a simpler era when physical might and martial valor determined leadership. The conclusion of our journey. The lands between holds countless more secrets than any single telling can capture. Every corner of this vast world contains details that reveal deeper lore. Every item description hints at connections between characters and events, and every environmental detail contributes to the grand narrative from software and George R.R. Martin crafted together. The obscure facts we've explored tonight represent only a fraction of what observant players can discover through careful exploration and attention to detail. Elden Ring rewards those who look beyond the immediate challenges of combat and navigation to appreciate the intricate web of storytelling woven throughout every aspect of the game's design. As you drift toward sleep, let these stories and secrets settle into your mind. Tomorrow, perhaps you'll boot up Elden Ring with fresh eyes, noticing details that previously escaped your attention. The golden eyes of non-tarnished NPCs will catch your notice. The weather's effect on your spells will feel more meaningful. The hidden faces and spreading corruption will reveal their tragic stories. If you enjoyed this journey through Elden Ring's hidden secrets, make sure to subscribe to Cozy Night for more deep dives into gaming lore and obscure details. Like this video if you learned something new, or simply appreciate comprehensive explorations of beloved games. And leave a comment about your favorite Elden Ring secret, or the most obscure detail you've discovered in your own playthrough. Until next time, cozy nights. May your dreams be filled with grace and your adventures lead you to victory. Rest well, and I'll see you in the next video.